Hey there, guys. This is Hendrick Tallardar, and today on the Water Cooler, we're celebrating two things. One, it is our 10th episode. We've been doing this for 10 plus weeks, which is pretty cool. 2 months ago when we started this, we didn't really expect for it to go this long in a way. We kind of thought it would just die out after the first episode, but it's kind of cool that we're able to keep doing this. So thank you for watching and listening and doing all that fun stuff. As usual, I'm joined by my co-host Tegiminis.
Yeah, hello?
Tega Waffle?
Tegiminis.
Okay.
Soft G.
Yes.
It's a soft G. And as usual, we have a guest with us, and it's a guest we're really happy to have around on TMC itself, and he does a lot of our streaming, and it's Alikchi, our resident strategy expert, the guy who pretty much put Xenonauts on the map for a lot of our staff.
Well, I'm glad to be here. Thanks for saying that. Happy to be the strategy nerd.
Yeah, I grew up with a lot of strategy games like Stratego, like the board game, Risk. Axis and Allies was the big strategy board game I used to play when I was like in middle school.
I'm going to be the ultimate hipster and say that I knew about Xenonauts before you, Alikchi.
I bet you did. I bet you did. XCOM, I didn't play that much XCOM before 2012. It took the 2012 for Axis release for me to circle back around and discover Xenonauts and, OG 94 XCOM.
Yeah.
I do remember those Stratego games with my dad. That's what really keyed me in to strategy games back in the day.
And you play other games. Like today on our live stream, you were playing a game called The Great War.
Yes, Commander the Great War. I've had World War I on my mind since the Centennial is, well, pretty much now. It's a traditional hex-based strategy game, but I think it avoids a lot of the pitfalls that a lot of these games do have, particularly games that come out of Matrix or Slytherin, in that it actually has a reasonable interface. It's pick-up, out-of-the-box playable, and it simulates the history pretty well, so I enjoy it quite a bit.
And have you tried other games like we're going to be doing? I know I'm at least working on a preview piece of Gettysburg, Ultimate General Gettysburg, and like those sort of games.
I have not tried Ultimate General yet, although I've seen you stream and I've kept my eye on it. It's definitely on my to-buy list. I do have a decent amount of experience with another Gettysburg game, the Scourge of War Gettysburg series, which is kind of insane and hard to access, but a lot of fun. You can dial down the realism to the point where you can only see what your commander, which is a unit, can see. You send orders to your troops by sending couriers, which are visible on the map. It's like the opposite end of what I think the Ultimate General spectrum is. Ultimate General, from what I know, is pretty accessible. The interface is clean. You can sort of jump right in. Scourge of War Gettysburg is one of those clunky old RTSs that, God, you do not want to jump into that without spending a lot of time on their forums, to say the least.
Or at least having experience with others.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
I recently bought Alpha Centauri through Good Old Games. I tried playing that, and I didn't realize how old of a game it was because I didn't realize how clunky the UI was compared to more recent games. Like, it was just like, this, what? No, I don't, So I had to just log out and not play it for a while.
That is one of the things you can say. I think that there's unironically been direct improvement over the years, and everybody's benefited from is interface design. I got the enhanced edition of Baldur's Gate 1, a few years ago, or rather when it came out, which I guess was about 6 months ago, and boy, I got into it, but it takes some time getting used to those 90s interfaces.
Well, it's like Xenonauts compared to 94 XCOM, right? Like 94
Or modern XCOM
XCOM
compared to 94 XCOM. I unironically prefer the modern XCOM remake by Firaxis over the 1990s XCOM by, I believe, Interplay or Sierra. The specific developer escapes me, but I preferred the unit management so much more.
The original '94 XCOM is a really great game, and it's kind of like they fit different needs, I guess. Is the new one is a lot faster. I think it's really
For sure.
It feels more fluid.
It's really
It's
accessible,
really-
is the
yeah.
thing. Like, it's a very accessible strategy game.
It's a very accessible and punishing strategy game, and it makes you want to keep playing it despite how punishing it is for a lot of people who aren't used to a punishing game to begin with.
It's definitely not as punishing as the original XCOM, I'll say that.
Well,
Like,
yeah.
the original
what I'm
XCOM,
saying is,
you know, like,
I know a lot of people who never played the original will play the modern remake,
yeah.
and they'll be like, it's really punishing, but I like it. It's kind of like with Dark Souls. Like, a lot of people are like,
Mhm.
I really like Dark Souls because it kicks my ass. But the nice thing is the modern XCOM remake has, like you said, been made into more an accessible fashion. A lot of people didn't like some of the changes they did based off the '94 one, like, the lack of base rating in the original release of XCOM Enemy Unknown. But obviously they added that in with Enemy Within, I believe.
Yes.
And some other things. Like, there's like minor stuff that a lot of like the diehard fans from the '90s are like, they should have kept this in, and they didn't.
Yeah, and Xenonauts has those things. Xenonauts does have issues with its sort of content, but I do think that if you're looking for a more pure XCOM experience and you aren't looking to play original XCOM through like either OpenXCOM or DOSBox, Xenonauts is probably the way to go, just because it's a pretty accessible port. Well, not really a port, remake, I guess. It is a direct remake, whereas Enemy Unknown is more of like a reimagining of what.
Yeah, it's the Firaxis take on the XCOM series, and that's totally fine because I like Firaxis games. Unironically, Firaxis is probably one of the few game studios I routinely will follow their development games because I don't think I've bought a bad Firaxis game in so long. Enemy Unknown was a bit of a letdown, but it was also because it was trying to fill the shoes of the original XCOM, and those are pretty big shoes to fill as a strategy game.
I don't think Firaxis has made a bad game, period. I can't think of a single bad Firaxis game.
Arguably, you could say, like, oh, well, Civ 4 wasn't as good as, Civ 2 or something like that, but I mean, even then, like, you're comparing a former Firaxis game to, the most recent Firaxis game that maybe doesn't come out as well polished, but they always polish it really well. Like, look at Civ 5. Civ 5 is really good now compared to when it first came out.
Yeah, I was gonna say I don't think there is anybody in the world that says that Civ 4 is not as good as Civ 2. Like,
no, I just pulled those two numbers out of my head.
Okay,
because...
I was gonna say, like, I think everybody agrees that Civ 4 is like just like probably the greatest turn-based strategy game ever made.
I actually much rather prefer Civ 3, unironically. I like
Civ
3.
Wow.
Statements.
I like Civ 5 after Brave New World. Before Brave New World, it was just kind of okay, but after Brave New World, it actually morphed into a really, really great game that, while I wouldn't say as good as Civ 4, is definitely is a lot more accessible and easy to learn, and it has
what we
stuff.
should do, because we talked about this in one of our TMC meetings earlier today on the day of this recording, is we should probably look at getting once Beyond Earth comes out by like later in this year, which is like only in like 2 or 3 months, something like that, or like a couple months.
Mm-hmm.
Or beforehand, in the build up to Beyond Earth, we should do like a regular stream of like maybe every night for like 2 hours. We do a Civ 5 game with like TMC staff, like myself, Alikchi, Tag, maybe Mark, who just came back, Otaka Shower, those type of people. Because those usually can get fun because you can always like bicker and like role play in your niche like factional role within the map you're playing as. Like,
that sounds great.
If you're playing as like Netherlands, like, oh, I'm just trying to trade. Why are you attacking me? I'm like there's one game where a guy I was playing with basically became like the trade hub nation, where like if their economy and everything they did was destroyed, everyone else's economy would just tank. And if like his deals with you dropped, your economy would just tank, and your unhappiness would just tank, and it was just great.
It reminds me a lot of the idea of that. I have zero experience with Civ games, by the way.
But that's the best part is Civ games you can be really bad at and have lots of fun with.
Well, Civ,
at least in my experience.
Civ is a super accessible game, though. It's one of those games that, like, I think everybody that I've ever I wouldn't say made play a Civ game, but encouraged to play a Civ game, has come back and told me that they did not think they would get into it, but they actually did. So it's
It's a game that, at least as a series, I've been playing with a lot of people over the years. I think I started with Civ 2, and that came out when I was pretty young. And I've constantly played Civ games with either people like I knew in boarding school or something like that, or in college. And it's a super accessible game.
Yeah, I just never had that gateway, I guess, but I'm definitely interested to learn it. I always hear great things about it being this pure, the closest thing to a pure and balanced sort of strategy game, and lots of great multiplayer stories that remind me of Stolium Infernum, which I'm doing a play-by-email of right now, actually.
There's
backstabbing and stuff.
There's a really good thing.
There's another game we could do is it's more of a tabletop game, is Diplomacy. That's a fun game though. We'll get into that at some other point.
So like with Civ, the big thing that makes Civ so great isn't that it's like a pure balanced experience, is that it's accessible to everybody. Like it has the best interface design in gaming, and always has. Like, I can't think of any other game that has an interface that is so accessible to both people who are experts and beginners. Like,
yeah, Firaxis did a really good job making the interface really easy to understand right off the bat. Like, you may take like an hour to try to figure out like all the minor parts, like where the sub menus are, but I mean, that's only like an hour of gameplay,
and you don't even really need those sub menus. Yeah. That's for people who like micromanage. It's a very it streamlines a lot of the stuff for you, and then when you want to get into it, then there's like, it says, well, here you go. Here's like a really nicely formatted menu, icons, like everything fits logically within everything else. It's a very very well designed interface, and a lot of game developers could learn from Civ, I think.
But Teg, what have you been up to gameplay wise? Like, what games have you been playing?
So I beat Dyad. I think I talked about it on the last podcast, and that game is a transformative experience. I think I didn't really get into it until the last levels, and specifically until the Eye of the Duck, which is the last level. It's like 15 minutes long. Keep in mind that it's a tunnel shooter where most levels take like 1 to 2 minutes to beat.
Yeah.
And but that and Payday 2. I actually want to talk about Eye of the Duck for a second. It's really interesting just because it's sort of, Dyad is a game, right? Like it has specific objectives and goals for you to complete as you're playing it, right? Eye of the Duck is not. Like, it's sort of the principle or the essence of Dyad distilled down into like a concrete thing. And it's a reference to a David Lynch interview where he waxes poetic about forms and shapes and how they could only interact in certain ways. And he uses a parable of like the eye of the duck could only fit where it fits. Otherwise, it would look terrible, it would be too busy, it would be visually uninteresting, that kind of thing. And it's just kind of an interesting, it could only be this, it can only be this thing. And really, really interesting game, really great experience. Do not play it if you have photosensitive epilepsy. It will trigger it so bad. Like,
that sounds very intense and very bad.
It's very intense. It's very, very intense. Often to the point that it's difficult to tell what's going on, but it's sort of trance-inducing. If you've ever played a Space Giraffe, or
no,
really,
I've never heard of that.
Or
what is that?
It's a Jeff Minter game. Jeff Minter is a guy, he's been making arcade games for years, but he also did the visualizer for the Xbox 360. So if you're familiar with...
Is he the one who's responsible for the terrible UI? There's ads everywhere on the Xbox?
Oh, God, no. He's just responsible for, if you play music on your Xbox and you turn on the visualizer, you know, those like...
Oh, okay, I gotcha. Yeah.
He's responsible for that. But he's also a game developer.
That's cool.
And all of his games sort of reflect that aesthetic of like neon colors, strobing lights, like, you know, never to be played by somebody with photosensitive epilepsy, right?
It sounds a little dangerous.
But anyway, it's very much like his games, and it's very, very good. And so I think it's like $10. I very much recommend it. and it took me a little bit to get into. Like, the beginning levels are very gamey, and it's like, oh, this is a tunnel shooter, but it really grows into like something that you can just sit down with and like trance out to. And then the other game, like I mentioned, I've been playing Payday 2, getting back into that, shooting virtual cops, not real cops. Please don't arrest me. And
shooting real cops is actually, I think, a felony in the United States. So
yeah, it
probably
is.
shouldn't do that to begin with. Like, there's a pretty standard reason to not do that.
I wouldn't
So
shoot,
we have
I wouldn't
TMC
shoot real
official
people
policy
anyway.
on shooting cops?
Yes,
there's an official
Okay.
policy at TMC that you're not allowed to shoot a cop. I'm pretty certain
Oh, boy.
our lawyers would not be happy with that.
Well, in general, just don't shoot people. Like, shoot at a target, don't shoot at a person. But yeah, there's just been grinding up the monies and XPs and kind of rediscovering my love for Payday 2 because it's great. Just like, oh, we're gonna stealth this, and I just like pull out my shotgun and start shooting it into midair, and everybody screams and falls to the ground, and I'm just like, yeah. So,
Are you playing with a group of friends, or are you trying to rely on the people on public servers? Because I have had bad luck with public servers.
Public servers are a nightmare in Payday 2. I only ever play it when I have at least 2 other friends online and we can have a group of 3. But one of my friends, my best friend, who I've been playing it with, he actually did a public server, and there were some modders on the server, and they caused the sky to rain bags of gold and made
It sounds amazing.
And made the NPCs start doing like stripper dances and stuff. So
yeah, apparently Payday 2 has a lot of vulnerabilities to that sort of thing. It's really easy to just hack your way up to being a level 99 whatever almost immediately.
Yeah, so I mean, like, if you're aiming to have just a fun experience and actually play the game and not have to deal with like a million hackers, although I will say there is a really good video online of some guy just using like an invincibility mod, and he just goes around punching people. Just punching enemies, and he gets kicked from every game, and like punching deals almost no damage. All it does is knock people down, but like people were getting really, really pissed off at him. It was really funny. But yeah, if you're looking to avoid that hacking experience, definitely like only play friends group games, because otherwise you're going to have issues, especially since pub games have issues in general, even when they're not like full of hackers, because everybody's just kind of like running around with their thumbs up their asses. So what are you playing, Hendrick?
I have been playing a fair amount of Dota lately, mostly because of the international, like we've talked about in previous episodes. It's been going on right now, and the grand finals are next weekend or the weekend after, I forget. And it's just that time of the year where when the international comes around, I start to get that Dota and like MOBA game itch. I'm usually bad at it, but Dota I've been having a bit of fun with, mostly because I just play it like really casual and like really laid back, and it's kind of fun to see the people who, like, if I'm playing on a public match, seeing those people get really mad at me over a video game. I think I'm a bit of a troll in that way. I've also been playing a bit of Payday 2, though not too much, because a lot of the people I play with either tend to get really heavily like angry and super serious about it, and again, it's one of those games where it's just better to have fun and be chill. I've also played a mod for Arma 3 called Breaking Point, which is basically what DayZ was trying to be, but it feels a lot better. There's a lot different elements to it. One of them being there's classes of player groups or factions, and what you can do is you can progress based off points by doing certain things. So if I'm a member of the Hunter group, I get points for killing a member of this other group, but I lose points if I kill someone from a different group, of like, out of the 6 available groups or so. So it's kind of cool, because then you can progress and get like better armor and stuff. The zombies move really nice. Like, the pathing is so much better than DayZ ever was. And the zombies also have like that weird like zombie stutter type thing, like you see in like classic zombie movies. So that's kind of cool. And the maps are really nice. There was one map where it was winter, and winter on its own is kind of cool, just because you don't really see that too much in a lot of the Arma maps unless they're like modded maps. And what was really cool and really creepy at the same time, aside from the music, was if you throw Winter in with the kind of creepy music and the fact that you're surrounded by zombies and you're on your own and you don't have any weapons, the map turned on really heavy fog, so you couldn't see more than like 5 feet in front of you, even though it was like
Oh,
daytime.
nice.
And it was just creepy as all heck. And I was like, man, this is really what DayZ really should have been. And I haven't played the standalone of DayZ, but I've heard lots of bad things about it, and I'm kind of happy because I used to play the Arma 2 version of DayZ when it was a mod, and I'd much rather play that, from what I understand, because it's just a lot better of a version of what Rocket and his whole team wanted to do. And apparently, Breaking Point is really just, it's more so what DayZ kind of was expected to be by the community. And using the Arma 3 engine is a really good idea. Because it's a really powerful engine. I mean, you're seeing a lot of stuff coming out, coming out from like Zeus and so forth. So
Yeah, just the volumetric fog, like you mentioned, and all the stance changes.
yeah, the
Arma 3
the
is...
biggest improvement I will say isn't like aesthetically. It's the pathing for the zombies is so much better. Like that was a huge gripe and issue that's been lingering in DayZ for so long that they
Mhm.
fixed in Breaking Point, and everyone's like, they fixed it. Why can't you?
Yeah, it really stunned me when they decided to make DayZ standalone on the Arma 2 engine. It was shocking enough that they managed to get a zombie game working on the Arma 2 engine, which, despite all the crazy things you can do with it, is, boy, not a good engine for anything other than, a typical military shooter, and even that,
Well,
it's got
I was
problems.
gonna say, let's be fair. All of the Arma games are pretty terrible engines. Like,
Well, I will say this because I grew into loving Arma over the past few years. I don't know if I remember playing Arma 1, but I've played it on my brother's computer, like when he would set up a scenario and he would like teach me how to play the game because he was really big into it.
Up
Arma,
Flashpoint, maybe.
yeah. No, I don't know if it was Flashpoint. It was Arma. It was just Arma at the time, I think. Or it might have been Flashpoint. Because I remember Flashpoint being on like my Xbox 360. I had that on Xbox 360, and that wasn't bad, but it
Oh.
also wasn't that good. Just because the servers were really bad. Single player was cool. But the problem with Arma over the years has been obviously the servers haven't been too stable for multiplayer, but single player they've always been really good. So you can make yourself like a really cool single player like mission scenario campaign playing against like really tough AI, and that was really fun. Um, Having that in Arma 3 now with a much more stable engine, multiplayer, I've never really had that big of an issue unless it's like a heavily modded server and I'm running like 30 different mods at once. That's always going to be an issue because that server's not able to handle all that processing, from what I understand.
Right.
But I'm not like technical in that knowledge. But yeah, like Arma has always been a cool game series that I've always loved. I remember distinctly playing Arma 2 on like the Milsim servers and using like Acre and TeamSpeak 3. That's something I would love to play with Arma 3 on like the OG Mumble we use for Pandemic Legion and Waffles. That would just be a ton of fun. But at the same time, it's always fun to hear like just globally everyone yelling at each other like, "Oh, we're going down!" Ah! Like that's just so much fun.
Yeah.
That's what I like about Arma. It's so unpredictable at times.
It's really ambitious. It's not always very good at what it does, but it's the only engine that attempts to do what it does.
Yeah, and it does some of the things that it attempts very well. Um, the one thing that they released was Arma Tactics, which was like kind of from my opinion, it was more or less an attempt to make like Fallout Tactics, if anyone had ever played those, and it was a very ambitious thing. And it was kind of interesting that they put it out on like Android OS and iOS, and it actually worked pretty well, and you could play it on PC as well. But it was primarily made for like mobile stuff, and it was using like more or less the Arma engine. I thought that was really cool, because it was basically, like I said, Fallout Tactics, or like, it was a turn. It was the same sort of like setup like XCOM. It was isometric camera angle. You would have to move each individual unit. You'd have to like worry about their action points. That was kind of cool to see it in the Arma setting because Arma has always looked like a really nice looking game. From like afar, not always super zoomed in at times.
Yeah.
Zoomed
If
in, you would
there's
see
one
some weird
weakness-
things. Like you'd see
Yeah.
guys like eyes just in different directions.
people clipping through walls of buildings, close quarters stuff, never been the strength. But
Yeah.
it is really encouraging to see Bohemia use the engine for other things that it's suited for, other than, 21st century warfare, like Take on Mars.
Yeah.
I never played it, and Take on Helicopters, but it's really good to see them branching out a bit, because they have a treasure in the engine, and they just need to apply it to less generic settings sometimes.
Well, that's why I think having the mod community for the Arma series is really good, because the mod community is really good at what they do. There's some mods out there, like there's the one mod that was basically GTA 5, but in the Arma engine. I know someone recreated Metal Gear Solid in the Arma engine as a mod. I'm like, that's really cool. Like, you don't get Metal Gear Solid on your PC. You can play it in Arma. Like, I'm totally fine with that.
So speaking of shooters and bad engines and people making shooters, Cliffy
That's
B.
a hilariously bad segue.
Well,
You
Cliffy
sound
B,
so
whatever.
enthusiastic to talk about Cliff Bleszinski right now.
I really do not want to talk about Cliff Bleszinski. So Cliff Bleszinski joined some other studio, and he announced a new arena shooter, and it's a shooter that you jump around an arena and you shoot people. Like,
You sound so angry
He's
towards
so
Cliff
enthused.
Bleszinski.
I'm not
So
angry.
much. The fact that I was like, hey, we should put this in our topics list. You did not like that at all. This is my punishment.
I'm so just defeated. Like,
So,
it's like,
for
I
those
just
who
don't even
didn't
want to talk
listen,
about it.
Or pay attention to the news, Cliff Bleszinski's back in video games. He had taken a break several months ago, or about a year ago, from Epic Games, I think he was at beforehand, where he made the most infamous gun ever made, which was a chainsaw gun in Gears of War. He has announced a new game studio called BossKey, and it is co-founded with Arjun Brucey, who was the Guerrilla Games co-founder, as well as an EA Games producer, or Electronic Arts producer. And they announced a new project called Project Bluestreak, which is a free-to-play arena shooter, kind of going back to Cliff Bleszinski's heyday of making FPS games.
I might have more to say about than Tej, because I was always a fan of the UT series over Quake, but I recognize that games like Quake Live and all that have really eclipsed UT in terms of the community that's still existing. So, there is, I think, a space in the market for a sort of drop-in, start shooting kind of thing in between. CSGO's competitive, you have to allot an hour to play this, and other shooters that are less intense. I'm hesitant about this because it's Cliffy B, and it's a personality-driven thing, and there's other Unreal Tournament style news coming. But it could be good. We just really don't know yet.
Yeah. So obviously, Unreal Tournament has a 2014 or 2015 remake release date. So basically, we're getting a new Unreal Tournament along with Cliffy B's new free-to-play shooter game. And like you said, I really like it if I can have a game where I can just drop in, play, and drop out, or hop out and not really miss too much of the thing. Like you said, with Counter-Strike Global Offensive, it takes about an hour or so of gameplay. Like, you're stuck there for an hour. The one thing I like about PlanetSide 2, which is another free-to-play shooter game, is I can drop in, shoot things, and drop out. The problem is, in PlanetSide 2, the objective is to take, a certain amount of the map, and it's basically a game that tries to be a game about a war of attrition, but everyone has infinite resources.
Right.
And that tends to be a problem with PlanetSide 2 that I don't like.
You can't, unless there's an alert, and your side wins the alert, you can't have a session of PlanetSide 2 and walk away feeling like you've accomplished something. Because as soon as you take a base, it's back in contention.
The best thing ever was, I believe it was under the first or second day. I know it's the first week of PlanetSide 2's wide release. The outfit I was in at the time which was a Terran Republic outfit. We basically spent about 6 hours on a Saturday grinding to take the crown for no reason other than we wanted the crown, and we held on to it for another like 4 hours. So basically, in that entire day, like we spent about 10 hours just fighting over one like building. And that was pretty intense. And like that was like because I hadn't played PlanetSide, the first one. That was a pretty cool experience, but like you said, it was like that was just 10 hours of my life wasted.
Yeah.
I'd rather not have that happen that often.
Yeah, the game, it's moving towards more concrete objectives now. You can lock out continents. That was rolled out with the release of Hossen, so factions can be blocked from continents. You can take the whole thing, which is a great major goal. You know, outfits taking... if your outfit has the majority of the score or a plurality in the battle to take a base, your outfit owns that base. You have your icon all over the wall, that sort of thing. And it's little things like that, even if they don't have much like strategic value, that make big outfits more fun to play in. Yeah. But if you're solo playing or in a small group, you got the same problem of not really having discrete objectives that are accomplishable.
One of my favorite things to do in PlanetSide 2, and I hope this is the case when Destiny comes out, though I'm not certain how Destiny actually works. I also hope it's the case when Project Legion comes out, if that eventually becomes a thing, which, you know, CCP Games, if you're listening, should probably become a thing, because we told you to put Dust on PC several years ago, was you would go behind enemy lines. Like, I would always go behind enemy lines with, like, myself and, like, 2 or 3 other dudes, and we'd all be snipers, and we'd all basically just pick off dudes and cause as much chaos of guys trying to catch up to, like, the big battle. And to me, that was just fun, because it was like, that was a very sandboxy, I'm going to avoid the big battle and do my own thing and actually have some sort of impact on the big battle. Unfortunately, because it's PlanetSide 2, it didn't always mean much, because it was that war of attrition with infinite resources. The one thing I will say from what I'm hearing about Bluestreak, getting back to Cliff Bleszinski's project, is he is more or less, quote, done. He's more or less over of the gritty bro zone experience of like Gears of War style, like, you know, super hyper masculine, hyper marketed, you know.
Good.
And he wants.
I'll call that good.
So he says expect something a little bit more just District 9-ish. Thereabouts. So that's what the reports are saying. So I think that's gonna be kind of cool, because if he goes for like a more colorful, like open experience, like, you know, more colorful, more I would guess like a laid back kind of like, this is what the world is, you know, bright and happy. Not bright and happy, but, you know, like more of a, we're not gonna be super serious hyper masculine dudes all the time type of experience. I think that you know, I think that's a lot better.
Yeah, I really look forward to just a color palette change is great. You know, the UT-99 and those 90s shooters appeal to me in a lot of the same way that XCOM 94 does. They have this sort of zany campiness to them.
Yeah, and like I think that's gonna be really cool to go back to in terms of, because you know, like after E3, a lot of people were pointing out, like, why is it that every game that's coming out more recently is super
gray and brown?
Yeah, gray, brown, gruff-looking dude as the lead, you know, protagonist, and there doesn't seem to be much in terms of variety. A lot of people are attributing it to, well, it's because the developers don't want to dedicate the time and effort of making these things. A lot of people are claiming that, well, it's the developers trying to hamper things, so the game engine looks a lot like, you know, they can soup up the what's it called, the, you know, the aesthetics, in place of having to dedicate resources from the computer or the game engine, or, you know, the console. A notable example is The Order is like really dark and gloomy, and basically people are like, you can only see 40% of the screen. The developers are like, yeah, but we're making it so it's atmospheric, and it's like, no, you're making it because you want the game to look a lot cleaner, or like, you know, a lot prettier than it actually is, by hampering like a lot of the colors and vibrancy of the world. Like, come on, like, we're calling you out on it. it's something I really want games to go back to. I like colorful games. Uh, the game that kind of pops to mind that I'm kind of happy is kind of going to like this more like happy, kind of bright poppy feel is Dawngate by EA Games, which is like their MOBA game. League of Legends has always had this like really bright, colorful world, which is nice. But I can't
Right.
really think of like many games that actually do that. PlanetSide 2 kind of has that, but it's kind of muted at times.
Yeah, it really depends on the continent, you know. And Indar at least has varied terrain, but very often it's sort of yellow, brown, rocks and sand. Yeah, I think that a broader palette is good for games in general. That was one thing that you mentioned Gears of War that really repulsed me about it. I couldn't identify, you know, with these gigantic meathead guys who all looked the same. You know, there was something visually uninteresting about it that I think paired itself with the storytelling's uninterestingness. I'm botching my language here, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, and I'm happy that there's a kind of a movement within the game development industry of they're going
Mm-hmm.
back to that campy feel for some of the games. Obviously, you know, for a game like The
Yeah.
Last of Us, you can't really have a super campy feel.
There's
But
nothing wrong with grittiness as a concept, but it's good to have some variety.
yeah. And also talking about variety, another shooter game that was announced was by Gearbox Software, makers of the Borderlands series, and it's called Battleborn, which is basically another MOBA game, but in FPS.
It looks very Borderlands. It has that art style. Kind of a TF2-ish, sort of cartoonishly oversized people vibe as well.
Yeah, and like we were saying, like we like that vibrancy. Looking at the screenshots from the announcement trailer, it looks very vibrant. But obviously that's
Mm-hmm.
a CGI trailer, so it depends on how it looks when we actually play the game. But
Yeah.
Borderlands has always had that vibrancy and poppy feel, and I like that.
Mm-hmm. Cell-shaded, sort of comic book style.
I wasn't
It,
a huge fan of the cell shading, to be honest.
Yeah, it's I think they must have lessened it in Borderlands 2 a little bit
Yeah.
because it didn't bother me as much.
I think that's what they did. I would love that, or our computers just got better over those couple of years.
probably.
But
But
I gotta say,
it's good that they're trying, you know, for a unique art style. That's rare.
yeah. But I do have to say, another MOBA game.
Yeah.
It kind of makes me like, eh. I mean,
The
Gearbox
art
in
style
general,
might be great.
yeah, Gearbox in general, I'm not too enthusiastic by, just because a lot of their
Mhm.
games I'm not big fans of. I didn't really ever get into the Borderland games, just I couldn't get into them. They weren't for me.
Right.
The stuff with Alien Colonial Marines and Duke Nukem Forever, kind of,
That'll sour you.
yeah.
Yeah.
That was, and then like Randy Pitchford's attitude over it all is basically like, okay, I really don't, yeah. Gearbox, you can make
Mhm.
your games. I'm just not going to be into them.
Yeah, it makes me nervous about the Homeworld remake, which is a property I'm dearly, dearly invested in emotionally. So, fingers very crossed.
Yeah.
But you're right. You know, Borderlands, very interesting art style, but in the end, it's a mediocre shooter married to a mediocre RPG. And, you know, that art style might be great applied to Battleborn, but we're going to be seeing it presumably from the top down in an RTS style view. I don't know. Fingers crossed on it, but it's hard to see what Gearbox could do to advance the MOBA genre. I'm not a huge MOBA guy, but I mean, what else is there to do? What can they do that's new?
So, yeah, like I don't know that many MOBA games that do the FPS type thing. There was Super Monday Night Combat and Monday Night Combat by Uber Entertainment, who are known
I
for.
remember those.
Those were interesting, and they tried to make a MOBA game that was a shooter, and twitchy, kind of like Quake, and it didn't exactly work out, but it wasn't. It was there was bad design decisions, and monetization options, but I'm gonna kind of give it a pass in the sense that at least it was trying to do something different. rather than an isometric, League of Legends, Dota type game. Like Dawngate's
Right.
trying to do that. The Heroes of the Storm, which is Blizzard's MOBA, is doing that. You have Heroes of Newerth. Like you have plenty of MOBA games, and only a few of them really stick around. Uh, this is more so trying to be a mix between Team Fortress 2 and Titanfall, in the sense that Titanfall has creeps, and the gameplay is more like Team Fortress 2, but with lanes. That could work. Games like Smite got really popular because it took the MOBA concept and did different things to it, which made it more
Right.
interesting. Like the fact that it's over it's a third person camera view in Smite means you can't always see if someone's going to sneak up behind you, which makes the oh shit, someone's ganking me, like that sort of thing is more
Hmm.
natural to happen, and I think that's a lot better.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. It is always kind of been weird to me. I think it's an artifact of it all evolving out of a Warcraft 3 mod that the MOBAs came to be in the way they did, as, sort of a single unit RTS. I have played a bit of Smite, and I enjoyed it a lot relative to my time with League.
Yeah, and the one thing I liked about Smite was the arena because there were different game modes. I always played the arena because I didn't like playing the the actual like MOBA section, even though
Hmm.
MOBA is like a battle arena and the arena was a battle arena. I didn't like the laning and you know the good versus evil side where you had to destroy the towers. Um, but it did some pretty cool things. Uh, but yeah, Gearbox is in a weird situation where I understand that they want to make new IP and they want to make a new type of game because making games like Borderlands constantly, which they're doing a third one of, as well as they're licensing out the IP to Telltale Games, I believe, to make
Trickling out DLC, yeah.
yeah, I understand that they want to go somewhere different, but at the same time, I don't think going into the MOBA space is going to really work out. But I mean, if it's a first-person shooter game that's very
Hmm.
MOBA-like, or at least has MOBA elements in it, it might work. We all love playing FPS games, and Counter-Strike is like we were mentioning earlier. A game like Counter-Strike, it's very simple. It's team versus team, go,
Right.
and those still do really well. So who knows?
Yeah, it all comes down to, whether Gearbox really has a vision, something unique that'll make this appeal to people over Dota, over CSGO, over League, or is it just, hey, the money's in these Dota games, in MOBAs, and let's put our own spin on a MOBA and see if we can muscle our way into that market
I
segment.
think it's more of the latter, but I
Mm,
think it's also a case of there's all these MOBA games, and they all are more or less the same type of game in terms of
mm,
just like how they look and feel. We're gonna take a MOBA game, but we're gonna do our own look and our own feel to it, kind of like what Smite did, and I think that might work better out for them than trying to do what EA and Blizzard are doing, and
yeah.
just making a straight Dota game or like a MOBA clone or Defense of the Ancients clone, since we're all of those games are based off that.
Right. Well, the more ambitious they claim to be, the more hopeful I'll be about it,
Yeah,
to be
I
honest.
really hope that they make it a deep game in terms of strategy, and they're saying there's RPG elements and like growth to your individual heroes. That's kind of interesting to like, oh, okay, so do I get to keep these like spells and abilities, kind of like what I do in Nosgoth between games, or do
Mm,
I only get it for that game? Like that's a big question to ask. Some games try to do that. I'm trying to think which one specifically. Like Payday 2, you can basically carry over your skills and abilities, but
yeah.
Payday
I
2 is not a
really
MOBA.
enjoy that system.
I really like that, and I think that might be a cool thing where like you create your own custom character, and then you can skill him in RPG sense into becoming a type of uh, hero. I think if
Trees, so you could yeah, pick hero X, but who knows if he's skilled into stealth or ranged
yeah,
fighting or
or kind of like what you do with Payday, where hey, I'm taking this base model, which is like one of the four dudes, but I can make him into really good stealth guy. So basically, I am the stealth guy on my team. That would be a kind
mm,
of cool system that a MOBA game could do and make things more unique. It also adds a lot of issues and variety involved that can make matchups really like painful for the losing side. But at the same time, it allows for a really interesting twist on the MOBA idea.
Yeah, the level of unpredictability, you'd have to balance it quite a bit, because if the players have so much influence over what their hero does, then, you know, at what level does strategy come into it, or should you might as well just pick any hero and hope that they're skilled against you?
Yeah.
You know,
there's
some possibilities.
And that's where things can get very very tricky with that idea. Obviously, that was just me like thinking out loud of that'd be a kind of cool thing to see in a MOBA game.
It would.
I'm still of the opinion that MOBA games are really oversaturated. So again, this is like it's an announcement that I'm not really too enthusiastic by.
I've never been a huge fan. I've only played casually, and that rarely at the encouragement of other people. But League is huge. I think the big motivation is people want to get a piece of that audience.
Yeah.
I think that
League and Dota...
Gearbox wants to bite into that audience.
Yeah, League and Dota 2 are huge MOBA games. I mean, they're the top two MOBA games at the moment. You know, international forwards going on. We're the winning team of the quote-unquote world championship of a single video game. We'll get $4.7 million and then some. And that's just mind-boggling for a video game player. Like, I can make... Wait, and you divide that up amongst 5 people, or like however many people are on that team, that's pretty much like close to $1 million a person.
Those are some stakes. It makes me sit up and pay attention.
And I think what a lot of it is Riot Games and Valve have done a really good job making the games easily approachable for a new player. Obviously, they're hard to do because there's some very steep learning curves in those games. Like MOBA has a very steep learning curve in some respects, but Riot and Valve do a really good job making new players come in and making people want to watch the esports aspects of it. At least I know with Dota 2, I'm not too familiar with League. I can download a replay of a professional games that's been played, and I can watch it on my own, and I can listen to the commentary of the commentating team in the game client. That's really cool to do.
That's fantastic.
That's basically like having a video on demand service within a video game. But
they've really done well.
Yeah. So I think that's about it. Teg actually had to go. If you hadn't noticed, he had kind of snuck off to go do some work.
He's a slippery one.
Yeah. But Alikchi, thank you very much for coming by. We always look forward to having articles by you. I always look forward to seeing your streams. And we should definitely do that Civ game.
Absolutely. I will begin my training regimen now.
Yeah. All right. So for more EVE Online news, video game reviews, news, and videos, as well as our streams, you can always visit thematani.com.